Folsom State Prison isn't just some old prison with tall walls and rusty bars. It's a whole battlefield, a place where gang rules hit harder than the law, where a wrong look can get you stabbed, and loyalty ain't just a word. It's blood in, blood out. This place made headlines when Johnny Cash sang behind those bars, but trust me, ain't nothing sweet about Folsom. Behind that music and history lies a world run by killers, shot callers, and OGs who built their names on violence and fear. Today, we're diving deep into the deadliest gang members ever locked inside Folsom. The ones who ran the yard, moved weight, and turned prison time into power plays. Let's start with number 1, Sonny Barger, Hell's Angels, Ralph Hubert. Sonny Barger was born in Modesto, California, back in 1938, but his life was no ordinary tale. From the jump, it was rough. His mom dipped out when he was just a baby, and his old man, a dock worker, and a drunk. Sonny got dragged around bar to bar while being raised by a strict Pentecostal grandma. He didn't have much growing up, but what he had was fire in his gut, the kind that gets you kicked out of school for punching teachers and joining the army at just 16. Yep, he faked his age to get in, said he liked the discipline, the guns, and the brotherhood. That military code would later become the soul of the gang he would command. After the Army caught on and gave him the boot, Sonny was back in Oakland, doing odd jobs and living with his dad or crashing at his sister's place. He scraped together enough cash to buy a bike, and that's where it all started. Inspired by The Wild One, that flick with Marlon Brando, Sonny didn't just want to ride, he wanted to run the streets. In 1957, with a couple of other ex-military dudes like Don Boots Reeves, Sonny started the Oakland chapter of the Hells Angels. That skull in a helmet patch, they got that made at a local trophy shop. They weren't the first to rock the Hells Angels name, but under Sonny, they'd become the deadliest. By '58, after meeting other Angels in SoCal, Barger became president. The old guard from San Bernardino faded out, and Sonny brought the mother chapter to Oakland. From that moment on, he was the guy. Sonny didn't invent the outlaw biker game, but he made it a way of life. He laid down strict rules: no shooting up dope during meetings, no stealing your own crew's stash, and no turning rat. But don't get it twisted. Behind closed doors, they were pushing heavy dope. PCP, LSD, heroin, meth, you name it. And they were making serious bank. By the late 60s, law enforcement said they were pulling in $31 million from drug sales between 1969 and 1972. That's cartel-level hustle run by dudes on Harleys. But Sonny wasn't just about drugs and bikes. He had an iron fist. You crossed him, you paid. One dude stole Sonny's Harley. Next thing you know, he's getting his fingers smashed with a hammer. Another club member jacked Sonny's coin collection. The punishment? He was made to swallow so many barbiturates that he dropped dead. That was how Sonny kept order. No courtrooms, just biker justice. And now Barger wasn't just feared, he was respected. Even cops called him the maximum leader. And while he always denied being the national boss, everyone knew he called the shots. When Otto Friedley, the original San Bernardino Hells Angel, went to prison, Sonny took the reins. He expanded fast. Chapters popped up all over the U.S. and then overseas. New Zealand, London, Amsterdam. The Hells Angels went global, and Sonny was their godfather. He knew how to use the media, too. When Hunter S. Thompson came around writing about the gang, Sonny let him in for a bit. But later, he called Thompson a total fake and said he got scared when things got real. Still, Thompson's book made the Hells Angels legends of the counterculture era. Sonny was even an advisor on biker flicks like The Wild Angels and Easy Rider. He rubbed shoulders with Jack Nicholson and Peter Fonda. But don't mistake him for some Hollywood sellout. Sonny was still out here running dope and smashing rivals. The violence wasn't just for the streets. In 1965, Sonny and his crew crashed an anti-war rally in Berkeley. They saw protesters as traitors. He even offered President Lyndon B. Johnson 100 crack gorillas to send to Vietnam. Of course, no one took that offer, but it showed how Sonny saw himself. A soldier, a patriot, a killer with a cause. As the Angels grew, so did the heat. Cops raided spots, found heroin, guns, grenades, even human skulls. But Sonny played the game smart. He handed over weapons to the cops in exchange for getting his boys out of jail. One cop even testified that Sonny offered to trade a bagged body of a leftist for every Angel released. That wasn't just street tough. That was political gangsterism. Sonny eventually landed in Folsom State Prison in 1973, sentenced for heroin and weapons charges. But prison didn't slow him down. He still ran the club from behind bars. He even befriended the Mexican mafia inside and earned respect across racial lines. Biker cliques had power in the yard, and Sonny was top dog. While locked up, Sonny gave interviews, studied sociology, and married Sharon Grolke, a former beauty queen. He got out in '77 after 4.5 years and wasted no time getting back into business. In 1979, he and 32 others got hit with RICO charges. Massive trial, 194 witnesses. Sonny and Sharon, the only two who walked free. The government could not come up with any incriminating minutes from any of our meetings mentioning drugs and guns, Sonny later bragged. But in 1982, the streets caught up to him again. Throat cancer. Heavy smoking cost him his vocal cords. Now he had to use a machine to talk, whispering like Brando in The Godfather. But even with the hole in his neck, Sonny was still feared. Then came Operation Cacus. The feds flipped one of Sonny's own, Tony Taterhead Tate from Alaska. He wore a wire, recorded meetings, and climbed the ranks. Sonny even called him the Hell's Angel of the 90s, but Taterhead was a rat. He collected $300,000 from the FBI and helped bust 38 Angels nationwide, including Sonny. They got Sonny again in 1988, charged him with conspiracy to transport explosives across state lines to blow up a rival gang's clubhouse. During the trial, the Hells Angels showed up deep, wearing their colors, circling the courthouse in black vans. One juror's kid even got threatened at a bar. Still, Sonny was convicted. He served 3.5 more years, this time in Arizona. He joked about it, sending postcards from prison to the prosecutor. "Nice weather, wish you were here." When he got out in '92, Sonny threw a massive party. Hundreds of guests, even politicians, showed up. But beef with the Outlaws biker gang wasn't over. They put a $100,000 bounty on Sonny's head. In '95, the feds stopped a hit squad sent to take him out. That war with the Outlaws, it ran deep, and Sonny was always in the middle of it. In the late '90s, Sonny moved to Arizona and joined the Cave Creek chapter. But he wasn't active in rides or meetings. He just advised, wrote books, made appearances in Sons of Anarchy. In his book, Let's Ride, he joked that he finally joined the 99% law-abiding bikers. But let's be real. Sonny Barger wasn't a 99%er. He was the original 1% outlaw, the man who said, "Keep your head up high, stay loyal, remain free, and always value honor." He turned a local biker club into a global crime syndicate. He didn't just ride with the Hells Angels, he was the Hells Angels. Number 2, George Jackson, the Black Guerrilla Family. George Jackson didn't step into prison as a big-time gang boss. He was just a young black man from Chicago, thrown behind bars for a $70 gas station robbery. But what made him different wasn't the crime. It was what he became inside. Prison didn't break George Jackson. It built him into one of the deadliest and most feared revolutionaries to ever step foot in California's toughest yards, including Folsom. People still know him as the revolutionary who turned Folsom into a war zone. Back in 1960, George got caught up in an armed robbery in Los Angeles. He was 18. The court gave him 1 year to life. That kind of sentence? That's how the system plays dirty. They hold your freedom over your head like a carrot you'll never reach. And instead of giving up, Jackson flipped the script. He spent years in solitary at Soledad in San Quentin. And in those cold, dark cells, he met Marx, Lenin, Trotsky, Engels, and Mao, as he said. That's when the dragon woke up. Inside those walls, he didn't just survive, he turned into a leader. He linked up with W.L. Nolan and George Big Jake Lewis. Together, they formed something that would shake the whole prison system, the Black Guerrilla Family. George Jackson, along with George Big Jake Lewis and W.L. Nolan, created the gang. But this wasn't just about running prison yards, it was deeper. Jackson, a former Black Panther, was fed up with how the system treated black inmates. He wanted to build a family inside, tight, loyal, and ready for war. But don't get it twisted, BGF wasn't just a crew. It wasn't about money or drugs. It was about power, revolution, and turning the prison into a battlefield for black liberation. George once wrote, "Revolution should be love-inspired." That wasn't just a quote, that was the code. The Black guerrilla family became the most feared political organization in the California prison system. George taught the homies how to read, how to fight, and how to think. He ran study groups, taught martial arts, and trained inmates to resist the guards, not just with fists, but with knowledge. "We attempted to transform the black criminal mentality into a black revolutionary mentality," he wrote, and it worked. Even white and Latino inmates started listening, but the state saw what was coming. They knew Jackson was a threat, and they made sure to keep him locked down. Even when he was transferred from San Quentin to Soledad in '69, the heat didn't die down. In January 1970, things exploded. A guard shot and killed W.L. Nolan and 2 other black inmates in the yard. The guard was a marksman, took 3 men out with 3 shots. A 4th shot wounded a white inmate just to make it look fair. A grand jury cleared the guard, said it was justified. That was the last straw. Just 3 days later, a white guard named John Mills got thrown off the 3rd tier and killed inside Soledad. No surprise, they blamed Jackson. Along with Fleta Drumgo and John Clutchette, he was charged with Mills' murder. They called them the Soledad brothers. No real evidence, just fear. The state wanted them silenced for good. If convicted, Jackson was headed to the gas chamber. But George wasn't going down easy. The Soledad brothers became a symbol of state violence against black prisoners. People on the outside started paying attention. The defense committee formed. Angela Davis joined it. She was more than just a face on the posters. She and George got close, real close. They called each other husband and wife. She helped him publish Soledad Brother, a collection of his prison letters. That book sold over 400,000 copies. Even folks in the free world started seeing George as more than an inmate. He was a voice, a leader, a threat. Then came August 7th, 1970. George's 17-year-old brother Jonathan stormed into a Moran County courtroom with guns. He freed 3 black prisoners and took hostages, including a judge. He wanted to trade them for the Soledad brothers, but when they tried to escape, bullets flew. Jonathan and 2 of the prisoners were gunned down. The judge died too. Angela Davis was charged because the guns were registered to her. She ended up beating the case, but the war had already begun. Inside, George kept grinding. He wrote Blood in My Eye, a revolutionary manifesto. But the system wasn't done with him yet. On August 21st, 1971, 2 days before his trial was set to begin, George met with his attorney Stephen Bingham at San Quentin. Not long after chaos erupted, George tried to make his final move. In 1971, he attempted to escape San Quentin. It's believed he had a lawyer sneak in weapons. Once the plan kicked off, shots were fired, guards were killed, and Jackson, well, he was gunned down in the yard. He died a legend. Bob Dylan even wrote a song about him. His death turned him into a martyr among prison revolutionaries and cemented the black guerrilla family's place in prison history. The official story, an escape attempt. But black prisoners and activists never believed it. No black person will ever believe that George Jackson died the way they tell us he did, James Baldwin said. And he wasn't wrong. Even today, there's no clear answer on how Jackson got the gun. Bingham was blamed, fled the country, came back years later and beat the charges. But the system still tried to bury Jackson's legacy. In prisons across California, if you're caught with Soledad Brother or Blood in My Eye, they'll say you're a gang member. They'll lock you up in the SAU just for reading the words of a dead man. That's how powerful those words still are. Jackson's death was the spark that helped ignite the Attica uprising just weeks later. His writings, his teachings, his fight, they didn't die with him. They kept spreading inside Folsom, inside San Quentin, in every cell where a man is still treated like an animal. George once said, "Capture, imprisonment, is the closest to being dead that one is likely to experience in this life." And yet, even in that dead space, he brought life to a movement. He left everything to the Black Panther Party, his books, his royalties, his will. He knew his death was coming. He said it. And when it did, 8,000 people showed up to his funeral in Oakland. That wasn't just grief. That was a message. George Jackson didn't run the yard with muscle. He ran it with mind. That's what made him deadly. Not just to prison guards, but to the whole system. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a field marshal. And even decades later, the system still fears his name. Because once the dragon breathes fire, there's no putting it out. Number 3, Joe Morgan, the Mexican Mafia. Joe Morgan wasn't your average street thug. He wasn't even Mexican. But that didn't stop him from rising to the top of one of the deadliest prison gangs in the U.S., La M, the Mexican Mafia, and becoming the mastermind behind it. Born Joseph Medugarac on April 10, 1929 in San Pedro, California, Morgan came from Croatian parents but grew up deep in the heart of East LA and Boyle Heights, neighborhoods thick with Chicano culture. From an early age, he rolled with the homies in the Ford Maravilla gang, picking up fluent Spanish and learning the rules of the street. By the time he was a teenager, Morgan had already caught his first body. He killed the husband of his much older girlfriend and tried to bury the truth in a shallow grave. But the system caught up with him, and that's when his prison journey began. At just 17, Morgan was locked up in San Quentin for murder. But even inside, he didn't play by the rules. While awaiting trial, he broke out using another inmate's identity, only to get snatched back and do 9 years behind bars. After getting paroled in 1955, he barely lasted a year before hitting a West Covina bank with a machine gun, walking away with $17,000. Not long after, he got clipped again and sent back to Folsom Prison. This cycle of crime, time, and escape became his way of life. In 1961, Morgan made headlines when he led 11 inmates in a bold escape from Los Angeles County Jail. And get this, he hid the hacksaw blades inside his wooden leg. Yeah, that's why they called him Peg Leg. But no one dared say that to his face. Joe wasn't some random white dude trying to hang with the homies. He lived the life, spoke the language, and knew the game. As far as we were concerned, he was Mexican, said a former La M hitman. Morgan studied Mexican history, spoke Nahuatl, the ancient Aztec language, and read about war, military tactics, and revolution. In the yard, he wasn't some weak, one-legged man. He ruled the prison handball courts and was feared in every corner of the block. He was the one-legged man you hear about in the ass-kicking contest, one cop said. Joe didn't just survive, he dominated and became Joe Pegleg Morgan, the white shot caller who ruled La M. La M, the Mexican Mafia, was started in the late 1950s by Chicano gang members locked up in Tracy, California. At first, it was a way to protect themselves from other gangs like the Aryan Brotherhood, but it quickly became something more, an empire. When Morgan linked up with them in the early 1960s, he and another OG named Cheyenne Cadena took things to the next level. Joe wasn't officially brought in until 1972. After Cheyenne was brutally murdered by rival gang Nuestra Familia. But his influence was always felt. He had the brains, the charisma, and the street smarts to move weight and make alliances. He wasn't just respected, he was feared. Morgan didn't just play politics in prison. He was hands-on. He was involved in stabbings, executions, and major takeovers. In 1971, he carried out what's considered the first Mexican Mafia street execution. One of their own, Alfonso Pachi Alvarez, had been collecting taxes from East LA street gangs but wasn't kicking up any of that money to the carnales locked inside. Joe didn't like that. He rolled up on him and shot him twice in the head. Just like that. Body dumped. Message sent. Joe's way of handling business was clear. Buy our dope and pay us a tax or die. And it wasn't just talk. The streets were littered with bodies. In the late 60s and early 70s, he stepped out of prison for a short stretch and used that time to expand La M's grip on East LA. He taxed street gangs, controlled drug deals, and forced loyalty. If you didn't play by his rules, you'd pay with your life. The Mexican Mafia wasn't just running prison yards, they were running neighborhoods. Joe had heavy connections too. He forged ties with the Aryan Brotherhood despite their racial differences. He even did deals with the Italian mob and Mexican drug cartels. He was the link between prison and the streets, a man with one leg locked behind bars, still managing to run empires. As one gang investigator put it, he was very, very violent when he wanted to be, just as dangerous as any of them. Things changed when Cheyenne tried to broker peace between La M and their enemies, Nuestra Familia, but some say Joe and the others didn't want peace. Before the meeting could even happen, 2 NF members got murdered. Then, in retaliation, the NF killed Cheyenne, over 50 stab wounds, thrown off a tier, and stabbed again. Some say Joe set him up, others say it was just bad luck. But one thing's for sure, after that, Joe became the boss, the official godfather of the Mexican Mafia. In 1977, Morgan tried to have a Seal Beach drug dealer whacked for not paying his dues. But the plan fell apart when one of his own, Ramon Mundo Mendoza, flipped and testified against him. That sealed Joe's fate, a life sentence. Even then, from inside Pelican Bay's SU, a high-security lockdown where inmates spend 23 hours a day alone, Joe was still calling shots. In 1992, Hollywood came knocking. Edward James Olmos made American Me, a film inspired by the story of La M. Olmos played a character based on Cheyenne, and another character named J.D. was clearly based on Joe Morgan. The movie showed prison rape, betrayal, and a mafia boss being murdered by his own crew. La M wasn't having it. Joe didn't give permission for his story to be told, and in the gang world, that's a major sign of disrespect. No permission, no peace, as they say. After the film dropped, bodies started falling. 3 people who worked on or consulted for the movie were murdered. Olmos himself went into hiding. Joe sued the studio for $500,000, and though the case was tossed, the threat was real. Word was Olmos had been green-lighted, put on La Ma's hit list. Some say he paid them off to stay alive. And even with all this chaos, Joe still had that grip. In 1992, while locked up, he gave the word to stop drive-by shootings in East LA. And just like that, the bullets stopped. That's not respect, that's fear, that's power. But even the strongest fall. In October 1993, Joe was diagnosed with terminal liver cancer. Some believe he was poisoned by the prison system. Others say it was just the toll of a lifetime of chaos. On November 9th, during a storm, he passed away in Folsom State Prison. He refused last rites from a priest, staying true to who he was till the end. He had his own sense of honor, said DEA agent Joe Moody. In his world, he walked above a lot of people. Even the man who snitched on him, Mundo Mendoza, said he felt guilty when Joe died. He had an option of choosing a different path, he said, but he made his commitment and took it to the grave. Joe Morgan may not have been Mexican by blood, but on the yard, in the gang, and in the streets, he was a carnal. And in the world of La M, that meant everything. Number 4, Robert Sosa, Nuestra Familia. Robert Babo Sosa wasn't just putting in work on the streets. He was building an empire from the inside out. A true shot caller for Nuestra Familia. Babo wasn't just dangerous because he had power. He was dangerous because he knew how to use it. And that made him one of the most feared figures Folsom Prison had ever seen. It all started in the early 1970s when the NF, that's short for Nuestra Familia, picked Babo as their new leader. This wasn't just some popularity contest. The gang was gearing up for war, and they needed a boss who could move like a general. Someone who could run things from behind bars and turn prison yards into battlegrounds. That's where Sosa came in. Back then, the prison game was brutal. La M, also known as the Mexican Mafia, had been running things since the 50s. They were mostly Southern Cali homies, and they didn't exactly treat their northern brothers with respect. Things finally popped off in 1965 over something as small as a pair of shoes. But in prison, disrespect is everything. So when La M jacked the Northerners' kicks at Duo Vocational Institute, it lit the fuse for the longest-running gang war in California history. Nuestra Familia was born out of that fire, and Babo Sosa helped turn that fire into a full-blown inferno. By the 1980s, Babo was locked up in Folsom Prison's notorious 4A building, but instead of laying low, he got busy. That's where he helped create the 14th bonds, not just some scribbled down notes, but a full-blown structure to train and raise up the next wave of loyal soldiers. They called it Nuestra Raza, the Northern Structure. While the NF Constitution laid the groundwork, the 14th bonds made sure the young bloods knew what it meant to ride for the cause. And Babo didn't stop there. He tightened up the organization, made sure it ran like a military machine. Soldiers, captains, generals, everyone had a rank, a duty, and a price to pay if they stepped out of line. Red bandanas, the number 14, the sombrero with the blade, all of it became symbols of loyalty to the North. N was for Norte. 14 was everything. 14th was life. But being a general in Nuestra Familia wasn't all rules and symbols, it was war. And in those days, war was everywhere. The NF had two main enemies, La M and their racist prison allies, the Aryan Brotherhood. That alliance was deadly. In 1972, AB soldiers Donald Hale and Fred Mendrin murdered an NF member for Joe Morgan, La M's so-called honorary godfather. It was a message, and it was received. But the NF didn't fold. In fact, they doubled down. Babo Sosa started calling shots not just in Folsom, but all the way down to Santa Barbara and even San Diego. He ran the San Diego regiment to make it easier to move drugs, and in Santa Barbara he became a name that made cops sweat. Locals even had a name for it, Santa Bruta. Because when Nuestra Familia set up shop, it wasn't just gang life. It was blood, fear, and control. In 2007, things in Santa Barbara hit a breaking point. Gang violence had exploded by 223% in just 3 years. The final straw came when a 15-year-old got shanked in broad daylight right outside Saks Fifth Avenue. That was enough for the cops to snap. They weren't playing anymore. They called in the big dogs, FBI, DEA, U.S. attorneys, the whole alphabet. What started as a small joint op turned into the biggest law enforcement sweep Santa Barbara had ever seen. They called it Operation Gator Roll, and when it hit hard. On October 15, 2008, over 400 cops and feds rolled up on 71 spots across SoCal. From LA to Santa Maria, doors were kicked in, suspects cuffed, and the streets shook. Almost 60 gang members got snatched that day. The cops turned the Earl Warren Showgrounds into a full-blown processing center, which they nicknamed the Dome of Doom. It looked like a movie, cops everywhere, gangsters lined up, some threw signs, others tried to act tough. But when they realized they weren't heading to county jail, they were going federal. That tough talk started to fade. By 11 a.m., the DA, the chief of police, and the U.S. attorney held a press conference. Operation Gator Roll is a success, they said, and they meant it. 28 Eastside gang members were indicted. 19 of them got slapped with RICO charges. That's federal racketeering, a big boy charge. And once the feds drop RICO on you, it's game over. Everyone pled guilty, either to state or federal crimes. Some went to prison. Some waited for sentencing. But the message was loud and clear. The game had changed. And yes, Santa Barbara saw a drop in gang cases after that. But even as some were locked up, others kept the fire burning. Because for gangs like Nuestra Familia, jail ain't the end. Sometimes it's the beginning. Robert Babo Sosa? He kept climbing. Eventually, he became the sole NF general, Nuestro general. That's top of the food chain. But power always comes with enemies. Sosa and his right-hand man, Death Row Joe Gonzalez, got impeached. In a bloody inner war, Black Bob Vasquez from Gilroy and Brown Bob Viramontes stepped in and took control. It wasn't just politics, it was survival. And Babo learned that even at the top, no one's safe for long. The gang's theme song, El Corrido de Nuestra Familia, became a kind of anthem. And the red rag? It wasn't just for show. It meant blood, power, and brotherhood. Some even said red was for the color their enemies shed. Nuestra Familia took the red bandana and the huelga bird from the United Farm Workers movement. Not officially, but symbolically. It meant revolution. It meant fight back. But it also meant control. Of drugs, streets, prisons, even people's lives. Babo didn't just run drugs or extort fools. He ran banks, robbed banks, created systems, even formed another gang under the NF banner. But when the younger Raza members got cocky and thought they could run things solo, the OGs shut it down. No one plays king unless the familia says so. Yeah, that's how deep this gang life goes. Streets, cells, courtrooms. It never ends. Robert Balbo Sosa left a bloody legacy. From Folsom's 4A block to the quiet streets of Santa Barbara, he showed the world that prison walls can't cage ambition. He became the deadliest norteño behind Folsom's blood-soaked walls. He helped write the book on how to run a gang behind bars. But the story doesn't end there. Number 5, Barry Mills, Aryan Brotherhood, Barry the Baron. Mills wasn't just another inmate doing time. He was a shot caller, a boss, and one of the most feared names in the prison system. If you were inside and saw him walking down the tier, you knew better than to cross him. Mills turned the Aryan Brotherhood, just a small prison gang back in the day, into a full-blown crime empire, and he did most of it from behind bars. Mills came up hard. Born in 1948 in Windsor, California, he started getting into trouble young. By 19, he was already stealing cars and robbing stores. After jacking a 7-Eleven and getting ratted out by his own partner, he got 5 years and was shipped off to San Quentin. And that's where the story really begins. San Quentin was the heart of gangland politics in the 60s and 70s. The Aryan Brotherhood, or the Brand as they called themselves, was already forming there. White inmates, tired of getting jumped by black and Mexican gangs, started sticking together. Mills jumped in head first. This wasn't about survival for him, it was about power. He didn't waste time making a name for himself. After his release in 1977, Mills tried pulling off a big-time bank job in Fresno. They expected to walk away with $2 million. They barely got $21,000. Another snitch gave them up. Mills got slammed with 20 more years and went right back inside. But instead of laying low, he started taking over. In 1979 at USP Atlanta, Mills went savage. He nearly cut off another inmate's head over a gambling beef. That kind of brutality wasn't rare in prison, but this one made noise. It showed everyone just how far Mills would go. It also earned him serious respect among the Aryan Brotherhood. By the 1980s, Mills had made his move. He joined a 3-man federal commission that ran the Brotherhood. That's when things got real. The AB wasn't just about race anymore. It was about money, drugs, and control. Mills and his right-hand man, Tyler the Hulk Bingham, took the gang to the next level. They started calling shots in both state and federal prisons. You couldn't just kill someone because you felt like it. You needed permission. There was structure now. A system. Mills made sure of that, but that didn't mean the violence stopped. It just got organized. In 1989, the AB whacked Arva Ray at the Lompoc prison, and by 1997, they kicked off a full-on race war at Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Mills and Bingham gave the green light. 2 members of the DC Blacks were taken out. That war wasn't about territory, it was about sending a message. We run this, was the vibe. The Brotherhood always had beef with black gangs. The Black Guerrilla Family, the Bloods, the Crips, El Ruckins, they were all on the AB's hit list. But this war was more than personal. Mills wanted to tighten his grip on the system. He wanted fear to do the talking. The same year, Mills suggested bringing in the Dirty White Boys, another white prison gang. It was all about expanding power, controlling more corners, and building a tighter web across prisons nationwide. Mills didn't stop there. He started sending out letters to AB members on the street. Parolees were told to get to work, push drugs, run extortion, set up murder-for-hire rings. The Brotherhood wasn't just a prison gang anymore. Under Mills, it became a nationwide criminal enterprise. By 2002, the feds had seen enough. The Department of Justice hit Mills and 39 others with a racketeering indictment. The charges? 32 murders or attempted hits. It was one of the biggest capital punishment cases in U.S. history. Mills was the main name on the list. The trial kicked off in 2006. It lasted 5 months. The government had tape recordings, videos, even a coded message written in urine. Yeah, you read that right, urine. That message? A declaration of war in Lewisburg back in '97. Jurors heard about the near decapitation in Atlanta. They heard how Mills called for riots, ordered hits, and controlled drug trades, all from a max security cell. Mills was convicted on nearly every charge. Prosecutors wanted the death penalty, but the jury deadlocked. Instead, Mills got life. 4 life sentences, no parole. By now, Mills was already at Supermax in Florence, Colorado, the most secure prison in the country, the same place where other big-name gangsters and terrorists were locked up. That's where Mills would spend the rest of his life. But even locked away, the legend of the Baron grew. Bald, heavy-built, wearing dark glasses from an old prison fight, Mills looked like he belonged on a movie set. He even had a strange soft side. He liked to crochet. Yeah, no joke. His lawyer once told the jury, "Barry Mills crochets." Does that sound like the hobby of a cold-blooded murderer? But behind the needle and thread was a man who ruled with fear. He believed in justified violence. His own words were, "If you disrespect me or one of my friends, I will readily, and to the very best of my ability, engage you in a full combat mode." And he meant it. Mills had a son in 1986, named him Arian Mills. The kid's mom, daughter of another AB member, Danny Dog. That just shows how deep the Brotherhood's ties went. Family and gang were the same thing. Blood in, blood out was the code. Kill to get in, die to get out. The Brotherhood's reach was so wide that even John Gotti, the mafia boss, had to pay for protection. When Gotti stopped paying in 1996, he got jumped by a black inmate. The message: nobody was untouchable. Mills was a part of all of that. He built something that outlived him. From a teenage car thief to a man who had the power to start race wars from a prison cell, Barry Mills was no ordinary gangster. He was the face of the Aryan Brotherhood. On July 8th, 2018, a day after turning 70, Barry Mills was found dead in his Supermax cell. The coroner said it looked like natural causes. But in a life full of violence, betrayal, and cold strategy, there's no such thing as a quiet ending. Not really. He lived by the gang. He died in a cage. But his shadow still hangs heavy over the prison yards he once ruled. And this is how the Baron of Brotherhood, Barry Mills, carved his bloody rise in Folsom and beyond. Number 6, Luis Flores, Mexican Mafia. Back in the late 1950s, California prisons were rough. Every gang was out for blood, and racial tension ran deep in the system. But out of all that chaos, one man stepped up and changed the game. Luis Huero Buff Flores. He wasn't just a shot caller doing time. He was a visionary who laid the foundation for one of the most feared prison gangs in U.S. history, La M, better known as the Mexican Mafia. Huero Buff came out of Hawaiian Gardens, a tough neighborhood in California, known for its street politics and gang culture. He was already deep in the life, banging with the Barrio Hawaiian Gardens set, and when he landed in Dual Vocational Institution in 1957, then a youth prison, now an adult facility, he brought the street game inside. But instead of keeping the same beefs going, he flipped the whole script and became the street soldier who built an empire. See, during that time, Hispanic gangs like White Fence, The Avenues, Clanton 14, Barrio Nuevo Estrada, and Primera Flats were all locked in turf wars. These sets hated each other on the streets, and that war followed them into prison. But Huero Buff had a different vision. He knew they'd get eaten alive if they stayed divided. So he started talking unity, getting these enemies to squash the beef inside and stand as one. That alone was unheard of. But somehow, Huero Buff pulled it off. As one former member put it, ain't nobody thought that could happen, but Huero made it happen. This wasn't just about peace, though. Flores was playing chess, not checkers. His goal was power, real power. He started picking the most violent, most loyal homies from each barrio. The plan: form a gang inside the prison that would control the black market, drugs, gambling, extortion. If it made money, La M would own it. Mundo Mendoza, another known member, later said that in the early days, the mission was simple: terrorize the system and enjoy prison comforts while doing time. That meant running things with fear. And it worked. La M grew fast. The gang used the name Mexican Mafia to mirror the Italian Mafia, showing they were just as organized, just as ruthless. Even their symbol, the black hand, was a nod to old-school mafia styles. But Huero Buff didn't stop there. By the early 1960s, he and another heavy hitter, Rudy Cheyenne Cadena, were already locking things down at San Quentin. That's when they set a new rule: a blood oath. Before that, members could go back to their street gangs once they got out, but not anymore. Now, once you were in La M, you were in for life. The only way out? Death. That's where the whole blood in, blood out rule started. You had to shed blood to join, and if you ever thought about leaving, you'd better start digging your own grave. They also laid down strict commandments. First off, no one joined unless they had a sponsor, someone already in La MA who'd vouch for them. That sponsor would also be the one to take them out if they messed up. Back then, new members had to get unanimous approval from all active members. That rule eventually faded, but early on, it kept the circle tight. Other rules? Family comes second. La MA comes first. If the cops ask questions, you deny everything. You show respect to your brothers, and if you had old beef on the streets, you let that go once you were locked up. Inside, it was all about the cause. What made Huero Buff different wasn't just his ability to spark fear. It was the way he made everyone believe in the mission. His talk about unity wasn't soft, it was survival. And when he backed it up with promises of money, protection, and power, homies from every street gang started falling in line. He built La MA to be bigger than just a prison gang. He turned it into an empire that reached far beyond the prison walls. Word on the tier was that Huero Buff was the kind of leader who made you want to prove yourself. And La MA made sure you did. Loyalty wasn't just expected, it was tested. Members were ordered to commit serious crimes, robbery, assault, even murder. If you hesitated, you were done. That kind of discipline made La MA stronger than any set in the yard. Even the Serenos, street soldiers outside, knew the rules came from inside. That's how much power La MA had. By the time Huero Buff's name started echoing through the California prison system, La MA was already controlling everything from drug smuggling to hit lists. If a Sereno didn't pay taxes, he'd disappear. If someone snitched or disrespected the wrong person, it was lights out. No mercy. That's how the gang kept fear alive. Flores also helped create the rule that no member of La MA could be killed without a vote. 3 members had to approve it. But for outsiders, no votes needed. If you weren't part of the mafia and stepped wrong, you were fair game. Law enforcement today still says La MA has no single boss. That's how Huero Buff designed it. No weak spot at the top. Any member could give orders and hundreds of associates would carry them out. That's what made them so dangerous. The gang wasn't about one man. It was about the machine. At the core of it all, Luis Huero Buff Flores was more than just a gangster. He was a strategist, a leader, and a visionary who turned chaos into a criminal empire. He laid the blueprint for how prison gangs operate today. And even decades later, the rules he helped write still control lives from inside the cell blocks to the street corners of California. This was the beginning of something that would grow into one of the most violent and powerful gangs in U.S. prison history. And it all started with one man, one idea, and one mission: control. Join us as we keep digging into the deadliest gangsters who ruled Folsom and beyond, one prison yard at a time. Number 7, David Cervantes, Nuestra Familia. David D.C. Cervantes wasn't your average prison boss. He was the kind of guy who could run an empire from behind concrete walls. The Norteños had been around since 1968, born in the chaos of Folsom State Prison. But decades later, it was Cervantes who pulled the strings when everything was falling apart. See, when 5 top dogs from Nuestra Familia got shipped out of Pelican Bay, it messed up the whole chain of command. Everyone knew the leadership stayed locked down at Pelican Bay, so without them, things got shaky real fast. Gangs don't do well with power vacuums, and this one sparked a straight-up fight for the throne. Eventually, 3 new generals took the reins. But it didn't last long. 2 of them got stripped of their rank, and that's when David D.C. Cervantes stepped up. He wasn't just another general. He became the one. For the first time in years, Nuestra Familia had a single top shot caller, and that changed the game. With Cervantes leading the show, the rest of the regimental structure lined up behind him, well, almost. Some fools stayed loyal to the old-school OGs locked up in Colorado. But inside California, Cervantes held the crown. Even Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger said keeping these guys in the same prison made gang violence worse. But it was too late. Cervantes already had control. California's Attorney General at the time, Jerry Brown, didn't hold back. He called Nuestra Familia one of 7 deadly prison gangs in the state. The gang's reach stretched all the way from Yuba City down to Bakersfield, from Salinas to the Sierra foothills. It's all about drugs, money, and taking control, Brown warned. The fight for control gets very vicious, and he wasn't wrong. Even though Cervantes was already locked up for murder, he didn't slow down. Prosecutors say he ran drug operations, money laundering, and even ordered hits, sometimes from a tiny prison cell with just a contraband phone and a couple loyal soldiers on the outside. That's real power. In 2024, Cervantes and 3 other Nuestra Familia shot callers, James Conejo Perez, George Puppet Franco, and Guillermo Capone Solorio, were finally convicted for racketeering and violent crimes across the Bay Area. And the charges weren't light. Murder plots, attempted hits, heavy drug pushes. They were running the kind of game that reached every corner of Northern Cali. Cervantes wasn't just any general. He was part of what they called the General Advocate's Office. Basically, if you broke a gang rule, he was the one who decided if you got green lit. Prosecutors proved that he was behind the plan to whack Lorenzo Lencho Guzman and John Shanks Reyna. He even gave the green light on attempts to take out Antonio Sombras Villagrana, John Knockers Musquiz, and Matt Rocha. And speaking of Rocha, he wasn't just a target. He was once one of the generals who ruled alongside Cervantes. But things turned sour. By 2019, he was on the gang's hit list too. That's the kind of turn you don't see coming. George Puppet Franco, he sat on the inner council. He was close to the generals, made big calls, and helped run things in San Joaquin County. The jury said he too was in on the plot to kill Guzman and take out Rocha. Same story for Solorio. He ran things in Monterey County and oversaw drug runs in Fresno. These guys weren't just sitting in cells, they were running operations with military-style discipline. By June 2025, the sentences came down hard. Cervantes got 120 months, so did Perez. Franco and Solorio each got hit with 175 months. The court said they were at the very top of the Nuestra Familia structure. They weren't just foot soldiers, they were the general counsel, the big dogs, the shot callers. Prosecutors made it clear this was about shutting down a brutal empire. They spread violence and fear inside prison walls and outside throughout our communities, said FBI Special Agent Sanjay Vermani. The Fed said the gang's entire senior leadership had now been taken down. All 7 council members were either convicted or serving time. But not everything about this takedown was clean. Before the trials, the defense teams called out the conditions these guys were held in. Solitary confinement, no hygiene, no proper access to lawyers. Cervantes and Perez, both older in wheelchairs, were being forced to take turns using a single disability cell at USP Atwater. Their attorneys said it was torturous and unnecessary. The Fed shot back. They said this wasn't about punishment, it was about logistics. Other jails didn't want to house these guys, and putting them back in state prisons would only stir up more problems. Cervantes, even at 76, was still labeled as one of the most dangerous men in California. And then came the twist. Defense lawyers said some of the indicted men were interviewed by federal agents at Moffett Federal Airfield without their attorneys. That could spark future motions to toss parts of the case. The legal fights aren't over yet. Meanwhile, another guy in the mix, Rocky Bracamonte, was denied pretrial release after feds said he was moving big weight and had a stash of guns at his place. He denied everything, but the court wasn't buying it. And Salvador Castro, another alleged member, already got decades behind bars for running drug deals from his prison cell with the help of a contraband phone. His lawyer said he had a hard life, learned to read in prison, and never had a real chance. But the system didn't show mercy. At the end of it all, Cervantes' rise showed how deep gang roots can grow, even behind bars. He took control of Nuestra Familia when it was crumbling. He ran it with an iron fist, decided who lived and who didn't, and proved that even prison walls can't stop a true shot caller from building an empire. So these were the most dangerous Folsom Prison gang members in the U.S. Do you think prison gang members have more power behind bars than they ever did on the streets? And can the system ever truly stop leaders who run entire criminal empires from behind bars? Let us know what you think in the comments box below. And if you liked how we presented you this video, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe for more.